PS5 jailbreak news update. So we've had some major updates to the PS5 scene over the past 24 hours. This is going to be a pretty big update here, so bear with me. Let's go ahead and dive straight into it here. So the biggest piece of news we've had so far is that there is now a hypervisor exploit compatible up to firmware 4.51. Now, as far as I could tell, this seemed to start with this particular GitHub repo that was posted by Kragson, the A53 code execute, so a proof of concept for code execution on the PS5's A53 coprocessor used by the PS5 on firmware 2.0, but could be ported to higher firmwares up to 4.51. It says proof of concept for code execution on the PS5's A53 and can be used to disable/defeat the hypervisor till 5.0, but I believe 5.0 is when it was patched, so 4.51 would be the maximum firmware. After this got posted, it seems that anybody who had a private hypervisor exploit that used something similar effectively just released it. So after this, we got Fail0verflow posting the method that they used over 5 years ago now on the PS5 to fiddle with the MP4 and hypervisor memory. So that was then released. Then not long after that, but Flats also released his private hypervisor exploit that he had up to firmware 4.51 that we've talked about on the channel before. It was previously private, but he has now released it. So all of that just in the space of a few hours within a 24-hour period, we have all of this stuff that got released. So what this effectively means is that the previous hypervisor exploit we had was Bypervisor, which only worked on firmwares below 3.0, whereas now we have a hypervisor exploit that can work all the way up to firmware 4.51. So firmwares 3.0 to 4.51 now effectively can be exploited with a hypervisor exploit. Now, the difference between that and what we've had previously up to 4.51 on those firmwares is that we've had to use kstuff like we do on most jailbroken firmwares, is that we have to use kstuff as a workaround for the hypervisor, and it works pretty well, but it does have a performance impact, which is why we need to disable kstuff when we're running our, game dumps to get better performance and faster loading times, because kstuff has a performance impact and it also slows down the system in general as it is running in the background, and it also has some stability issues too. So now instead of using kstuff, you'll be able to load a hypervisor exploit on firmwares 3.0 to 4.51, and those downsides will be removed. So generally, you'll have a faster, more responsive jailbreak on 3.0 to 4.51, and it should also be more stable, depending on whether there's any instability in the hypervisor exploit itself, but providing there isn't, it should generally be more stable as well. So that's what you can look forward to on those firmwares. And of course, the other big thing you'll be able to do is load Linux, as of course Fail0verflow did say that they hope this helps with Linux with the exploit that they posted, and the Flow has confirmed that this will allow his PS5 Linux to run on firmwares below 5.0 up to 4.51. You'll be able to run Linux once it is released. Another benefit with Linux that the Flow has also posted is that his pull request to the Mesa repo has been merged for PS5's GPU support. So that means you'll be able to just install Mesa on the PS5 once you have Linux running, and the regular version of Mesa that gets installed will support the PS5's GPU instead of having to install some custom version of Mesa and then worrying about whether or not you accidentally update the system and install the normal versions and it overrides the custom drivers. That's a problem we have on the PS4 Linux that we will not have with PS5 now that this has been merged into the main repo for Mesa. So that's another benefit for when Linux gets ported. Also, if we take a closer look at the Fail0verflow exploit that was posted, it is using a save game Lua-based exploit, like the ones that we commonly see, except this was using a different game, so CUSA 00158. So this game is Don't Starve Console Edition, the USA version. So interesting to see that they used a different game to the games that we commonly see for loading the Lua-based exploits, like the Japanese games, and of course Star Wars: Revenge and Okage Shadow King for the Mastercore exploit. We now have another game added to that list of games that can load save-based exploits. Now, another big release we got was Luac0re version 2.0 from Gejine. So this, of course, is the exploit that uses Star Wars: Revenge in order to be able to run a userland exploit, but this userland exploit has full JIT capabilities, so it is one of the most powerful userland exploits we've seen on the PS4 and PS5. It now works up to the latest firmwares on the PS4 and PS5, so you can run this on 12.70 on your PS5. Now, it is just a userland exploit at the moment, but it has been released, which means we're just waiting for the kernel exploit to be implemented with it, so that we can then use this exploit to load the kernel exploit and jailbreak the PS5 up to firmware 12.0. But even without the kernel exploit, this userland exploit is powerful enough to perhaps do things like load homebrew on its own in certain ways. It would still be very limited. It would not be like a full jailbreak, but we might be able to run some interesting things just with the userland exploit on its own. So Gedgin is stating here that now we have arbitrary native userland code execution on the latest PS4 and PS5 firmwares without requiring a kernel exploit. And of course, it now works on the latest firmwares, whereas previously it did not work past firmware 8.0 on the PS5 because of the stuff that was removed from the emulator. But that's now been resolved with this bypass using the JIT exploit. And arbitrary native code execution means that we can now write and run native homebrew and potentially maybe run backup games without a kernel exploit. We'll have to wait and see there, but certainly maybe homebrew and emulators might be able to be loaded just with the userland exploit standalone, which could work on the latest firmwares. So that would certainly be interesting. So if you do have a console that's on the latest firmware right now, like a PS4 or PS5, then by all means go ahead and buy a copy of the Star Wars 0re Revenge game on the PSN store, because it is fairly cheap on the store. The physical copy is like ridiculously expensive, but you can get it cheap on the store if you're on the latest firmware and get it installed and ready for anything that might come out. I do have a tutorial that shows you guys how to get the exploit installed as well, that I'll leave linked in the video description. Next up, we have this NP account restore payload from Earth0re, which is designed to restore your PSN account configuration on a jailbroken PS4 or PS5. So the way it works is that you back up the config.dat file and auth.dat file from a console that has been signed into your PSN account at some point in the past, and then you can restore them onto another jailbroken PS4 or PS5 by creating a dummy user account and then using FTP to copy those files into the system data priv home user ID folders, and you can swap out those files with the ones from your PSN account and then load the payload on that console, which will write the data from those DAT files to the system registry, the username, account ID, email, online ID. All the settings from that account will be applied to the registry, and then you'll just need to reboot the console, and you will have all of those account settings applied to that profile on the jailbroken console. But I generally wouldn't recommend using this at the moment, especially on a console that has a lot of data on it, because there are situations that can cause this to soft brick your console, where you would have to factory reset it and lose your data if it does go wrong. Next, we have another payload that fixes an issue on the PS5, and that is the PS5 Nano DNS from Luac0re. So this payload is effectively an update blocking payload, which works in a pretty interesting way. So if you're using the YouTube jailbreak or the Netflix and hack, you may be familiar with issues where, you have to set your DNS to 127.0.0.2 or something that redirects to the local host so that the YouTube application doesn't get updated. And then sometimes you can use Nomadic's DNS, but obviously your ISP or your router can override that DNS and then just force all of your internet traffic through the ISP's DNS so nothing gets blocked. That's a common issue. So something like this resolves that problem. The idea is that you set your DNS server to 127.0.0.1. That way the internet is effectively blocked whenever you're not running the jailbreak. And then when you run the jailbreak, you have this nano DNS payload get loaded as one of your auto load payloads. Once the jailbreak is loaded, you have it auto load this payload, and then it effectively runs what appears to be a local proxy server that then allows the internet traffic through so that you can then connect to the internet, but it also blocks the update links so that you will not receive system updates on your console. There's even a config file that can be edited that's written to the console with this payload, where you can add other domains that you want to block. And because this is local, it's no longer relying on external DNSs that can be overwritten by your ISP or that could go down at some point in the future, whereas something like this is local that you can run on your own console that blocks the updates. So definitely a recommended thing to try there on your PS5. We also have a save database that's now been added to the Garlic Saves website from Earth0re. So you can download decrypted saves and also re-encrypt saves and just select your profile to resign those encrypted saves to. It also includes the Star Wars 0re Revenge Luac0re saves, so you don't have to upload your own versions of the save files to resign them. Instead, you can just head to the save database here, select the Star Wars 0re Revenge and select the encrypt option, and then you can select your profile that you want to resign the save for, and it will go ahead and resign the save and give you the download for that save file. So you now have a save database that has been built up here within Garlic Saves. Void Whisper is also working on the next version of Void Shell, which is going to include cheat support built in. Settings will now auto-save. The fan control is now fixed. There's a view and edit INI text JSON field from within the file commander, which is awesome. So you'll be able to just like open those particular text files and be able to edit them directly. You also have Home Assistant integration. That'll be interesting. Also option to upload package to the data folder, ext1 or USB 0, and UI improvements. We see a screenshot here showing the ability to also close the game from the web panel as well now, so you can launch games and then you'll also be able to close the games, and the cheats will also be implemented in there in a future version. And also with version 2.0, that was now also updated to make it possible to run the web panel locally on the PS5 itself rather than another device. That's another option. To do this, you will need to install the asset pack. So when you download it, you'll now have the assets.zip file, which you need to extract into the data void shell ww assets folder. So you can copy the assets in there and then install the void shell local package file using the package installer. And once that's installed, you'll be able to launch that application on the PS5 home screen, and it will load up the web panel for Void Shell when you have the payload running. That way you can customize the settings of Void Shell directly on the console itself, install package files, customize your autoloader for your payloads and all of that stuff directly on the console. And finally, the Garlic Save Manager has been updated to version 1.7 on the PS5, which fixes a lot of issues that were present in previous versions. Of course, it supports PS4 saves now as well as PS5 saves. You can decrypt, encrypt, and resign your save files as well from the Garlic Save Manager web panel, accessible when loading the payload. So that's all of the updates I was able to get to in this video. I'll probably have a lot more to cover soon with all of the developments that are happening right now. The PS5 scene is just moving at a rapid pace at the moment. So yeah, lots more to come. So thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or